And good evening. It's one camera, one lens, live and uncut. So sorry for being late, but those Google gremlins hit me again. I don't know. Mic wasn't working, speaker wasn't working, but my guest was there all the time. So, with no further ado, let's get into the show. This is going to be a good show, I'll tell you, because I've been looking forward to talking to this lady. I haven't spoken to very many ladies. Third lady guest, so I'm really pleased about that. Today's guest has been, listen, you just write this down when you got a second, just write this down how much she's done. She's been an actress, an ice skater, horse trainer, voice coach. She's an inspiring speaker because I've listened to her, and is the voice of Stuck in Customs. Oh, and by the way, she does a little bit of photography from time to time. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest, the lady that has caused more problems for men in the background with just the simple words, well, welcome back. My guest is Karen Hutton.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. It's good to talk to you, and thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
The first time I switched on Stuck in Customs, and it came out, welcome back, Paul. I was going to invite my wife to pop around the corner and say, who are you on there now? But,
you can blame Trey for that. That was Trey's idea.
Was it Trey?
Yeah.
Typical.
It's funny, when we recorded it, I said, are you sure this isn't too sexy? He goes, no, this is perfect.
I did write down sultry voice, but I thought I can't possibly say that.
Yes, you can. They say it all the time. I've had marriage proposals from my voice.
Oh, have you? Lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely to hear. So, Karen.
Yes.
Passionate about your photography, but one thing I wanted to ask you, because I noticed on your website when I was checking it through today, it's a great website, by the way.
Thank you.
I love it where you've put life is light, and that is important to me. Can you, because I'm really proud of my tagline, leave your camera bag at home, but your tagline, life is light, just tell me what that means to you.
Well, there are many levels to that tagline. One is, obviously, photography is all about light. So, in a light conversation, I can say that, because as photographers, we love light, we chase light, we wait for it, we curse it, we bend it, we do all these things. But, art and photography for me is also spiritual. So life is light to me. We are creations of light. If you want to just go off in that whole tangent, that is me 100%. So on every level, to me, life truly is light.
That's lovely.
And I also feel photography for me is love and light made visible.
It's a true passion of yours, photography, isn't it? Photography is very important to you.
Photography is me. I mean, I put all of myself into it. Unlike, I've done all these things. The reason I had a list, as a child, I had a long list of things that I wanted to accomplish. Many of them I had to accomplish by a certain age. When I started I was already riding horses and doing all those things when I was very, very young. So when I really went for photography, it was in a dark room, black and white photography. And I loved it. I wanted to just live in the dark room. But the chemicals made me sick. So I didn't like the idea that other people would be developing my work because it was never the same. So it was hugely devastating. Thank God I had this list. So I went at it with a vengeance, figure skating and acting and all those things I wanted to do. They're all storytelling, really. Even the horses and its connection and its communication and its storytelling and its light, and it's living that. And photography went with me, all the way through. So I have this incredible photography collection of all these, parts of my life.
It's interesting what you say there. So what you're saying to me here is that at a tender age, you actually wrote down a life plan?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, I had this vision. I had a vision, actually, when I was young, and I only recently started talking about it because people used to look at me like I'd grown 3 heads. And now I don't mind it as much if they look at me that way, but I used to, so I used to keep it to myself. My vision as a I must have been, I don't know, I might have been 7 or 8 years old, and I had a vision of myself. There was 2 me's, one watching and one being it. So the one of me on a stage in this beautiful theater, and I was standing there with my, I was obviously either singing or speaking. My arms were out, and I had this audience full of people. This huge column of light came down through the top of my head and came out, through my mouth and my midsection and my hands. And this light went out and healed everyone in the room. It transformed everyone. It walked out transformed. I never forgot it. It became, I didn't know what it meant, for the longest time. I'm like, what the heck? What do you do with that when you're 8 years old?
Exactly.
But it was burned into my consciousness, and really, I guess I would say Life is Light really reflects back to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty much informed everything I've ever done, and that's it.
That's a fantastic story. That fantastic.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Let's we've really skipped through a number of years. How many years was it when you from your dark room to when you picked up the camera again and started seriously? This is the digital age. What sort of break period was that for you?
Wow, that was a long time. That was, let's see, oh boy, that had to be. I'm going to be dating myself now. Of course, you know what my favorite saying is with dating myself? I'm dating myself. It was the best time I ever had. Anyway, do I know how to show myself a good time?
Yeah, exactly right,
yeah. So, 30-something years.
It's amazing because this digital age that we hit, obviously this is what you need. It's interesting you mentioned about falling unwell with the chemicals, because I believe I felt unwell. I used to print Cibachromes from Kodachrome slides, transparencies, and I fell unwell, and I didn't actually relate that until a few years later when someone says, oh, you're not doing your Cibachromes anymore, and I said, no, I stopped, and it suddenly dawned on me that maybe that was one of the reasons. So I too stayed away from basically being developing my own work, and effectively just went straight to send the processing off and got the photographs done for me and just went on that route.
Yeah,
but
the only reason I knew is because I would go in the darkroom and have these massive headaches and nausea, so it was a little easier to put it together.
Yeah. I just sorry, someone was trying to join the link there. So
yeah, I may have
clicked him off. Don't worry. If anyone does, we'll just have to sort of say this is a private conversation.
Yeah, that's all right.
Don't worry. So yeah, what the point I'm coming to then is basically, so you got back into the digital photography. Is landscape your main direction, your main genre that you prefer to work with?
Well, it's the genre that I'm known for. I am a photographer. Yeah. I mean, I am a photographer. I love taking photos and telling stories and sharing a point of view through my photography, period. I became known for landscape photographer because when Google Plus came about and I was in there on day one, I mostly was, I live in the Lake Tahoe region, so that was my subject, and I love the out of doors. My heart's, I'm like, the hills are alive, that whole thing happens to me when I'm in the out of doors. So that was what I mostly shared, and that was where I worked out my stuff, was out with landscape photography. So that's how I became known. But the truth is, I love architecture, I love, I just love telling stories. Love macro.
Well, you can see that from your website, the way that I was looking through it today, because you look at the work, and as you say, yes, you're known for your landscape photography and the work that you do. But then when you look at the other pages, there's the glass and steel page, and then there's the floral pages that you've done with your macro work, and you can see that there is different genres to your photography. And as you say, you are a photographer. You're not a landscape photographer per se.
Yeah, although I'm actually doing a show on, coming up, I think I'm allowed to say, on Twit Pro, Frederick Van Johnson's Twit Pro, which will be on landscape, There
you go.
Yeah, so,
I do know of one other show that's going to come on that one, but I'm not allowed to say anything, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
He's getting a good little team together there, I think, Frederick.
Oh,
he's got a very good idea.
Yeah, it's going to be really something. But But yeah, I'm
It
happy
is,
to be
yeah.
called. You know what my mother used to say? I don't care what you call me, just don't call me late for dinner. So I don't care what you call me as a photographer.
There you go. There you go.
Just come
Well,
with
whilst we're
me
on the
on my
subject
ride.
whilst we're on the subject of your landscape photography, um, I get the impression that when you're taking a photograph, you're taking a photograph of not what is there, but what you see. Does that does that
Well,
question make sense?
yes, it does. And that's such a really deep question. That's like a whole thing unto itself. But so that's why I'm kind of pausing here. I'm like, okay, how do I
Get onto
summarize that whole thing?
yeah.
Um, I would say, and I thought a lot about this because I was trained in classical photography, right? So you
Mhm.
shoot what's there, and then well, even in the dark room, you would sit there and you would choose your chemicals and your paper and your dodging and your burning and your cropping and your everything so that it just had the story you wanted to tell. So, and I find that in myself, I design everything. My space, everything's got to have this story and have it be just right and
Yeah.
impact people a certain way. So when I shoot a landscape, there's a certain quadrant of my work that I try to make more realistic. But I always like that little slice of fantasy because when I stand there and take a photo, it isn't just what I see that I want to put in there. It's the music that swells in my head. It's the scene from the movie that's never been written that plays in my head. It's sometimes I'll literally weep. It's so beautiful. It'll be
Mm.
this feeling in my stomach that I know that's the frame right there. It's those
Mm.
feelings and that impression, which it goes well beyond what I see.
Mm.
And a lot of people say, "Well, I want to share what I felt when I stood there." It's that, and it's quite a bit more because there is along with that, there's the life
Mm.
is light part. There's what I stand for. There's what I came here to do as a being
Mm.
that I want to imbue all of that in my photos. So when I
Yeah.
process
I
them,
think
it's not
I
normal.
think I think I've got to be honest with you here. I saw your speech at Google. And you basically, if memory serves me correct, you did a couple of before and afters. In
Mm.
other words, the photograph, this is what I took, but this is what I saw. And then at that point, your photography suddenly hit me. I thought, now I know where this lady's coming from. And I think really to a degree, you look at some of the old masters, which we're going to talk about later, the Ansel Adams and the Edward Westons and those sort of guys. They did the same, didn't they? They took the
Yes.
photograph, then back in the dark room and did it. I'd hate to think. I'd hate to think. Well, in actual fact, no, that's the wrong way of saying it. I would love to see the work that Ansel Adams and the others would produce nowadays with the tools that are available. Can you imagine it?
Right?
Could
Oh
you
my
imagine it?
goodness. Yes.
They would just blow everyone away. They blew everyone away with their work with just the minimalist of gear.
Yeah.
I even saw a video once of Ansel Adams used to put his prints in the microwave, which was quite amazing to give it a real gloss finish, and that's how he worked his work. It was just
Well,
amazing.
it's
The
so
guy was
interesting.
so
He was
fortunate.
amazing. I know he would have been right on the
Mm,
cutting edge, I think. I actually had a
yeah,
chance to touch and see and look under a magnifying glass an original Ansel Adams print of San Francisco, the Golden Gate. It would be the Golden Gate Bridge, except that it was before it was built. So it was taken from the
right.
Marin Headlands looking into San Francisco prior, but he did it on an
Mm,
8x10 contact print, well, it was an 8x10
mm,
contact print. So therefore, it's an exact impression of the 8x10. So the clarity,
yeah.
it was a historical point in time, but the clarity, you could look at the furthest away point, the distance-wise, and
Mm,
it was every bit as just crisp and clear as the closest. And
yeah.
the colors and the paper that he used and everything,
Yeah.
just it's like burned into my brain. It was
I
incredible
know.
to get to see
Yeah.
that and
We
handle it.
we were fortunate. I think it was maybe 3 years ago. There was a very big exhibition of his work held in London by the Greenwich Museum. And these were awesome size prints. They were just enormous size. And
Yeah.
we just there was no point in going up close to it. You just had to sit back and just study it from about 6,
Yeah.
8, 10 foot away, and you
Yeah.
just took it all in. But it would be great to see what he'd been able to develop or produce with the tools that we have today. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So it's I'm interested in what you said there about your what you took what you wanted to see at a later stage. Let's talk about your macro photography and the other bits and bobs that you do with your photography. Macro photography is. We had a quick chat before the show started. It's not true macro photography, but it's
Well,
certainly close-up work.
it depends on how you not identify, but
Yeah.
yeah, macro. I mean, like I shoot with 100. I shoot Canon right now. I shoot with 100 millimeter macro. So, if I look at my lens, it's macro photography.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But before I had that lens, I used to shoot macro with a 70 to 200, and
Okay.
nobody knew the difference. So it's not macro in the sense of you can see, like some people who do macro, they've got it's like ultra. It's like a marathon. Are you running marathons? Are you running ultra marathons? Are you running mid ultra, higher end? So there's all these levels of said same thing. So I call it macro.
Yeah.
It's the
Does
whole
street
world.
photography appeal to you at all?
Does what?
Sorry.
Street?
Street
Oh,
photography appeal to you at all?
well, I'm trying to decide if I can actually say this yet. I'm doing something next year that will be telling in this department, which we're not quite announcing just yet. But it never has, largely because of where I live. I haven't, since I've been back into photography with my DSLR, full time and everything. I don't live in a city, so it's kind of hard to do street photography. What makes me uncomfortable, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, is people that I don't taking pictures of people I don't know where I have to ask their permission. I'd almost rather slit my wrist than do that. I have a real aversion to it. But I like shooting candid street photography, and I love scenes and stories and moments, unusual, cool, like, oh my God, did you see that? Moments. I love to capture those.
Yeah, being ready at the right moment as well.
Yeah.
I tell you, we'll come on to street photography at a later stage, because we're going to talk about the Arcanum later on.
Okay.
You're a master. I'm an apprentice, and I'm loving every minute of it.
That's awesome.
You touched on it just very briefly, just a short while. Let's talk about gear. You're how can I put this? You're still shooting the Canon. Is that Mark D? Mark III?
Okay, so this is going to blow your mind. I'm selling my 5D3, and I'm shooting with a 6D. I've got two 6Ds right now.
Right.
How about that?
I'm a Fuji user now, but before I was Nikon. So the 6D, is that 1.5 crop? 1.6 crop?
No. It's all full frame. They're both full frame. 6D is, they consider it a notch under the 5D3, but the 5D3 is an older sensor, and I needed the better, the less noise at high ISO and the better in low light. And I did some side-by-side testing, some A/B testing with them on, each on their own tripod, and determined that for what I need, what I really need it to be good at, the 6D is better at it than the 5D3. So I sold my 5D3.
You switched over to that, yeah. Lenses? You got a sack full of lenses there?
No, I'm not a sack full of lenses kind of gal. Basically, I've got my 24 to 70. It's the Series 2, 2.8. I've got I still own the 70 to 200, Series 2, the 2.8, gorgeous thing, but it's too heavy, and I was having tendonitis in my elbow. So my husband is using that one now. So I replaced it with a 70 to 300, which is like a 3.5 to 5.6, I think, is its, range. And I'm loving that lens. It's fantastic. And let's see, I've got a 14 prime, which I love for a particular thing that it does, and then I've got my 100 macro. Okay. That's it. Yeah. That's what I carry. And a lot of times I leave my 100 at home if I'm packing them all.
Yeah. Now, I've seen you talking on videos with Frederick and the others about the mirrorless cameras. I think the one that I particularly watched was when you were talking about the new Sony had just come out. I think Gordon Lane was in the conversation with it. What's your feeling about mirrorless cameras, Karen?
Love it.
But put it this way. Why haven't you switched then?
Lenses. They don't quite have the
Really?
lenses that I need yet. It's very close. Might be
Hmm.
next year. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting. I'm literally poised
Yeah.
on the edge of the pool, because I don't know if you know that before they released the A7 A7R combo,
Mm.
I did a media junket, and we got to try all the gear, and I wrote a guest blog on Stuck in Customs
Hmm.
about my findings, and love it. Love the Sony stuff. I know that other manufacturers are coming up in the market, and there's some really exciting developments,
Hmm.
I think, in the next year. And I'm
Hmm.
hoping somebody comes up with the array of lenses that I need to do my work. I'm very specific and very clear about what
Yeah.
I need, how it has to operate, how quickly it has to operate. Um,
Mm.
Me and gear, like, I'm good enough at the gear to know exactly what I need and how it has to function. And if it doesn't, then get out of my
Yeah.
way, because I'm definitely not about the gear. I'm definitely about the vision and the tools that it takes to get that done.
You're the first person I've spoken to that basically has said, I'm not going to switch to mirrorless equipment until they get the lenses right. You're the first person. Every time it's been about, generally okay, the Sony A7R and the S options have obviously changed the game, the ballpark a little bit,
Totally.
but the people that talk about mirrorless, they immediately say that we don't get the separation, we don't get this, we don't get that. And they're talking about the camera. They're not talking about the lens. And as I'm perfectly honest with you, you're the first person who said, yeah, when they start producing cameras with quality lenses and the group of lenses that I want for my job, that's when I'll switch. But
Right. And
until
so when
then,
I say that to people, especially people who are gearheads, you
yeah.
probably talk to mostly guys, and probably guys who put gear kind of in the front. That's what they like to talk about. I fall asleep in those conversations. They bore me to no end, because I'm
Mm.
more about the vision and the art. And I don't. I wouldn't say that I don't care, but I would say that, if somebody comes up and hands me the package that lets me go do what I do, then great, because
Mhm.
I am all about, I know what I do. I know what I can create. Now give me the tools to
Yeah.
do that. And then so when I say that to people, they go, "Oh, well, then you can get, this converter, and then you can,
Mm.
and it's not as fast." But I'm like, "Okay, so right there you just shot yourself in the foot, because if it's not fast, I don't care."
That's exactly the next question I was going to ask you, because strangely enough, I was watching a video today. Trey and Frederick have just released a video about what's
Yep.
in their bag.
Yep.
And Trey going through his list of bags, his Leica lenses with his adapters, and he seems to be quite happy to work that way. But
Right.
obviously, horses for courses, people like to work their particular way, and you're not in that field of using adapters. You don't want to be manually focusing. You don't want to be it's your ballpark to have everything operating together as one.
I don't mind manually focusing. I mean, gosh, back in the day,
No,
that's all we did. But
exactly, that's what we did. Yeah.
the lenses aren't set up that way. You don't have like you've got the little light and the beep, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But the truth of the matter is, I do shoot
Mhm.
manually a lot,
All
but
right.
I may yank my camera off the tripod and go shoot a bird that's going by at whiz bang speed, and I can
Mhm.
capture that if my gear is as fast as me. So I shoot such a variety, I'm not willing to give up my wildlife, because I love that
I'm
too.
glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that, Karen, because when we go and look at some of your images, there's one particular image I saw. Um, it's of the statue got a tree in the left-hand corner, and then there's a bird in the right-hand side
Oh,
of the image,
okay, okay.
and that basically sums up exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't want to be fettered. I don't want to be thinking about, oh, come on, come on, come on, come on. If I have to feel that
no,
way when I'm shooting, then I'm going to throw that in the lake.
yeah,
That
yeah,
is no
exactly.
use to me. If I have to think about my gear, then the game is lost.
And that's a good point as well, because myself, I'm very fortunate with the job that I do. I'm a project manager at an exhibition stand building company, and I travel Europe quite a bit. And I used to go out with all my Nikon gear, the D200, D50. I even had the V1 for a period of time with those lenses. I had a sack full of gear on my back. I called it a just-in-case bag of equipment, because I would be thinking, shall I be using my 35? Shall I use my 50? Shall I use my 7300? And in the end, I came to the conclusion that I was really not concentrating on my photography because I was worried
Right.
about the equipment that I'm using. And
Exactly.
that's
I mean,
why I sold it all and bought the Fuji.
right. So now when I go out and shoot, whether it's no matter what I'm doing, whether it's landscape or any
Mm.
other kind, I see what I want to see, and let's talk about landscape. So I want to shoot a big scene, and I see where the action
Mm.
is and where the story is, right? Okay, so that's where the story is.
Mm.
24, boom. That's where the story is. 14, boom. I see, then I choose the tool. A lot of people do it the other way around, like you just said.
Yep.
And by the time they figure all that out, the moment is lost, and they can't
Moment's
sense.
gone.
Yeah, the moment's gone, and they can't sense. Like they're so hung up in the gear.
Mm.
What are you doing it for? What is your art? What are you trying to
Mm.
say? You know what is? So I do it the other way. So
Yeah, no, I can understand perfectly where you're coming from. I'll tell you what we can do here at this point, because I think it's a great point. Just checking what we've got here, because next we're going to talk about your show, and I know you want to talk about that, but I'm going to screen share.
yep.
With a bit of luck, we'll be able to go to your website.
Alrighty.
Can you see it?
Yes. Yep.
Right, now what I'm going to do, actually, the one thing, a little trick that I learned from someone.
I love new tricks.
Well, it's not a trick, it's just something. If I go freeze the frame, then while you're talking, we can look at your images. So what we should have is the screen full of your website. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. So I'm choosing Earth and Sky, and this one here, Lake Tahoe.
Yes.
Look at that. Look at that.
I know. It's an amazing place.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. There's certain times of day.
Tell us about this image, Karen.
Yep.
You called it Aquamarine, which I love the title.
Yep.
Aquamarine. Well, tell us about what was happening here.
Well, I mean, basically, last year a lot of people shoot Lake Tahoe in the snow. I've been focusing on other things, and then I decided I'm going to get Lake Tahoe with snow. And then last year we had practically no snow, but this one day we actually had a little bit. So the light was right, and you just clamber down to the edge, and there is that incredible color. This is actually an example of a photo that I shot more realistically than impressionistically, because Lake Tahoe in and of itself is so impressionistic, especially under certain conditions. So I just really went down there to get this. To me, this is a story. I mean, this is like a story of Lake Tahoe when it has snow, and when you get the light right and the color is coming out of the lake, and you get the rocks, and it's like it speaks to you. I mean, that's the thing about Tahoe. And to me, this is a slice of that voice that you hear and see when you stand at the edge of Tahoe under certain conditions. So that's really the story.
What song was going through your head when you took this one?
It's not always a song.
All right, okay.
It is, I'm just trying to think now what this one was. This is more like, okay, so what I hear in a moment like this is, there it is.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. I literally hear that.
Nice
and
one.
It's in that
nice
voice
one.
too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that one you just
again.
passed is like one of my current favorites, the waterfall
This one here.
Back
the waterfall one before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely piece of action. I love this tree, this angle here.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
It was that's just that this is Solduck Falls on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, and I had to hike down. You can't tell from this photo, but it's like you're like one step from getting washed away in that river, and you just want to be really careful. It's not dangerous outright, other than you can make you really nervous. It's just you look at that river and you're like, if I went in, yeah, that would not be good.
That would be it.
That would kind of be it, probably. But
it probably would be, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty commonly photographed moment, but I loved it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of photographs of this particular area,
Yep.
Remind us where this place
This is Antelope
because
Canyon.
you have to be careful going down here, don't you?
Well, they don't let you go down now without a guide, because it's owned by, the Native Americans own this land, so you have to go in with a guide, and that's partly because their guardianship over the lands, but also these canyons were formed by repeated flash floods that literally fill them up to the top.
Yeah.
So if you're and they get like monsoon season, which is roughly like now into September. They have flash floods, and you don't necessarily know they're coming, so you have to be aware of the weather and the conditions. So they don't take tours in there if there's any chance of a flash flood, because there's no getting out if that happens.
Yeah.
You see clear at the
Beautiful
top.
light coming through there.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You just almost can't go wrong. It just sort of gives you go here. Have this beautiful gift of light and canyon. It's incredible.
Exactly. What sort of setup did you have on your camera for that one?
I had a tripod and tripod in the right settings, basically. I think I used my 24 to 70 exclusively in here.
Yeah. Okay, the one thing I did do before we came online, for those that are watching, this is my Pinterest site, and I've got wait for it to load a little bit, there's down at the bottom, go down here, Karen Hutton, there we go. Now.
Yes.
Street photography, Karen.
Indeed. Well, there's a story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really sit there and I go, a lot of people that get so caught up on labels and like, oh, now you're doing street photography, now you're doing portraits, because I've done portraits too. And I'm like, I don't think of it that way. I think of it as, oh, there's a story. So here, this is one of the Paris subways. We were waiting for the train, and I loved that billboard on the left. And then all of a sudden it turns into a movie in my mind. And this movie is, I don't know what the whole story was, but this part of the story was this girl in this billboard was escaping. And this was the last we saw of her as she disappeared. It was like she took one look back, and then when she turned forward again, she was gone. This was like a window that was closing, and she got out.
Yeah.
Because the world was black and white and kind of underground and desolate, and her heart soared and went other places, so she went to this magical place. So that was the movie moment that played in my mind as we were waiting for the train. Welcome to my world. And so that was why I did it like that. Yeah.
Very nice little story, that. Love that. Here's an example of macro work.
Yep. And that's sort of semi-macro. But they look like penguins to me.
Yeah, they do. They do. Emperor penguins, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so they became that weird juxtaposition of still life and penguins.
This one is done quite a bit of treatment on this one by the looks of things. A little bit of hard work on the computer with that. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
That's because so first of all, that's at Embarcadero Center, which is a shopping center in San Francisco. So it's a shopping center. But no, it's not. It takes place on another planet. And this golden orb, this is not public access. This is well underground, and it is guardianed by these people who take care of this golden orb that is waiting for its, and you can see that it's got this scrawling, writing on the outside of it. Well, that's a code. That's a language. It's so it's waiting for its time. So the guardians come down the stairs to check on it. I mean, I'm not kidding. This is the kind of stuff that happens when I shoot. I look at that and I'm like, oh my God, that's the story. So I write this whole fantasy science fiction story about something like that. So people look at it and say, oh, you do a lot of processing. And I'm like, honey, you have no idea what's going on in my mind.
Right. The processing has started as you're taking the photograph.
Exactly.
I was just literally quickly flicking through there, but I didn't actually do the one which I was talking about with the bird. But this one I've seen. I really like this image. This is great. This is great. This is
Well,
right up
this,
my alley.
yeah, and this is like an old, this is in Bodie, California,
Yeah.
which is a kind of a ghost town, and everybody and their mother takes this photo. So one day we were there, and I thought, I give myself challenges. Like, you know, in the Arcanum,
Of
I'm always
course.
giving my poor apprentices, you know, okay, now go do this. It's because that's how I do it. So I looked at this car, and I'm like, I love this car, but all I could think in my mind were all these images of this car that I've seen, and I'm like, okay, new task, Karen, new task. Figure out a
Mm-hmm.
way to tell a story. Make it come to life in a way that nobody has, that you can actually. So I held my camera and I'm like moving around and I'm like, where is it? Where is it? Because when I find the frame, I feel it. It's like, oh, there it is. Or the music
Yeah.
swells, or the scene starts to play, or this thing happens to me when I know I've got it. And I could not find it. I'm like, and I went away and I came back and I'm like, you have to find your new angle. So I dropped the camera down, didn't find it right away until it hit the angle where this became a face. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you know, the story that I called it Fire Up Bessie, all of a sudden her name was Bessie, she had this face, and her story was that she was owned by these people that lived in Bodie, and she would wait for them, and all of a sudden they'd go, we're going to go to town, and so Fire Up Bessie, we're going to town. And then, you know, they'd turn around and she'd be like all ready to go, and then they'd go off to town. It would be really exciting. So, but here she was with only her memories as the earth literally reabsorbs her.
Yeah. Great story, Karen. Great story. Love it. Love it. Let me come out of screen share. That's a really beautiful way to work in actual fact. Something that I've never thought about doing.
Well, it isn't something I ever thought about doing. It's just that's the
It just
part.
comes to you.
It's just always been like that for me.
Mm.
And so when digital came of age, it wasn't just exciting to get back to photography. Suddenly there were tools to be able to bring that part to life, which
Yeah.
was something I couldn't
Yeah.
do back in the day. And that was
Mm.
why, you know, one of my early influences when I got back into photography, I didn't start back in with black and white. I'm coming back to it more now. I started back in because I discovered Trey's work. And
Yeah.
those techniques that he was showing, because these stories were getting louder and louder and more vivid, and, you know, more and more like, I've got to be able to express them or I will explode. And then I saw his work and I was like, oh my God, because I kept seeing like woodcut, like Japanese woodcut paintings, you know, with this certain style and these certain lines and fanciful thing. And then I saw his work and I was like, I've got to learn how to do that, because those tools are going to help me tell my story, to help me get this out of me. It is like,
Yeah.
I've got to, you know, get it out there.
I think
So.
I think one thing that I've noticed with Google Plus, and being interested in what's happening in photography, your side of the pond, that I find that in Britain here we got a very distinct love or hate relationship with HDR.
Right.
And I
I
think
can
what's actually
understand that.
happened, I think probably what happened there at the beginning was when HDR came about. I do not for 1 minute put Trey in this bracket, but I think a lot of people grunged the HDR effect to its nth degree
Mm-hmm.
and effectively gave it a bad name.
Yeah, I mean, anything new that's going to happen. People are like,
Well,
oh.
I think really, to be quite honest, what we're experiencing now with HDR is effectively what the mono guys experienced with color when it first hit the scene. When the Soul Lighters and the William Egglestons and the not William Klein as such, but those two fellas who started taking colour photographs of street scenes, and everyone's, oh, hold on a minute, no, we use mono because it is that genre. But you see, you go back even further into art, when Monet and his guys started doing their
Right.
type of work, the other guys were saying, oh no, you can't possibly paint that way. That's not painting.
Right, and George Seurat, you know, with his dot, you know,
Exactly right.
his stippling technique, you know, oh my God, that's not painting. So
Exactly.
whatever,
You
it
know,
gives people something to
when,
do.
when
Complain.
exactly when Picasso turned up with his straight lines, they think, what the devil is all that about? So this HDR thing is, when it's done right, when it's done with feeling, and when it's done with knowledge and what you're trying to produce, that's when something really sticks out, and
Yeah.
then the work is
Well, and the thing too
seen
is
in
like,
its correct form.
yeah, and HDR is merely a tool. It's merely a technique, and it's what is it? High dynamic range. So all you're doing is capturing levels of light that one single frame doesn't. Now we are starting to have tools, plugins and tools that enable you to create a similar effect. And so is that HDR? I don't know. So it's
Well, this is it.
yeah. So at this point, it's merely a way of looking at things. And in any case, I never apply anything in my post-processing globally. I work in sections, and I go and, here I want it to be like this, and so I'll, through layering. That's why I work in Photoshop, is because of the way.
I was going to ask you, the way you're talking there, you obviously use Photoshop because of the layer requirement.
Yeah, people say, "Oh, you don't like Lightroom." I'm like, that's not true. I just can't do what I do in Lightroom. I do what I do. I use the tool for what I want to create. So I work in sections, and I paint through and brush through and create it my way.
Exactly right. Exactly. We both have got our shows. Obviously, I've got this one, Live and Uncut. You've got a great show, The Chat. Slightly different in the fact that generally you visit that guest and you talk to them. You're really enjoying the show.
I love it. It's really challenging because of the editing. I think my next phase, once I get through, I've got many things on the burner right now. So once I kind of get through that hump, and my next thing is to get some editing help with my show, because that's giving me some problems right now. Because that's the flip side of doing these things live. Is then now you got an editing extravaganza on your hands. So I started The Chat as a Google Plus Hangout. I started doing it that way. Yeah. And Daria Musk was my first guest, and it was fantastic. And I was like, yeah, this is great. Well, what happened was a friend of mine, because The Chat is, it's about living your life as an artist, or better yet, living your life as if it were your art. So I talked to people who are doing that successfully and I do all walks of life, but it's predominantly photographers, but I do bring in other people. So a friend of mine who's this brilliant marketer and entrepreneur and is hilarious to boot, I had to do a show with Gordon. So Gordon Fowler was that person. Well, he is the least technical person on the face of the planet, and I was like, trying to get him in a hangout was going to be like so painful for both of us. It just wasn't going to work. So he was only an hour and a half away from me. So I packed up my gear. We set it up. This is the first time I had done it. We set it up. We did it, and I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is so visceral and so real. And since I live in California and spend a good portion of my time down in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley is there. I like to travel. So when I go places where there's people I want to talk to, it's very garage. People are like, oh, you should shoot more B-roll. You should do this. You should do that. And I'm like, honey, I do what I can do, which right now is set up my camera and sit down and talk. And if there's talk, and if there's somebody, as there have been in, like when I went to Kelby Media and I had their incredible team there to set up a set and light it and shoot it, and then they did some light editing for me, and I was like, will you guys go everywhere with me? It was amazing. And at Smug Mug recently with Chris McCaskill, Michael Bonacore was there, and he shot a lot of B-roll for me as we walked through. That's incredible. But I made it lean and mean, and I didn't, I had to weigh out the amount of time and manpower and energy and time that I have, and I scaled it to that. And but I would like for it to be a little more. So I'm going to see what I can work out in 2015. So I have some amazing people in the can, that I've already shot that I need to edit, and I just need the time to do it. So
for me, I'm not into the editing side, so this is why I just do it live and uncut. So if you've got burp or whatever, it's going to happen.
And yours is so fantastic. I mean, it's brilliant. And the thing about with a Hangout is you can go all over the world. And so that's the one thing yet that I can't quite do, but I'm like, but it's so much fun to be face to face with someone. When I actually, funny enough, today I was just sitting back and I watched the first episode I did with Frederick Van Johnson. I just didn't realize how nervous I was. And do you know what? When we finished the broadcast at the end of it, Frederick, in his normal, typical way, I'm sure you know him a lot better than I do. When we finished the broadcast, he says, "There you go, easy." And I'm like, "Jeez." I was just The first time is always hard. I was having a
Oh,
hard time you got to find your voice. You got to not just your physical voice,
yeah,
but who am I
yeah,
in this realm? And that takes
exactly
a
right.
while.
Yeah.
A lot harder than
Yeah,
people
it
think.
does. It takes a while to settle in, but I've been so fortunate with all the guests that I've had. Total, they're both from this side of the pond, as I would call it, and your side, and absolutely. And not to mention, I've even spoken to Martin Bailey out in Tokyo, which was just totally amazing to speak to Martin. But
Isn't it
that
fun?
was
Isn't it
fantastic.
fun to connect with
It's
these
unbelievable,
people?
isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and
Unbelievable.
kudos to you because it takes some gumption and it takes something extra to do something like what you're doing. So I hope people appreciate
Yeah.
it because, high
Oh,
five,
thank you.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
to you.
High five to
Yeah, high five.
the Google Pluses. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I was just gonna. That'll come back to me because there's a point we were going to talk about. We're talking about the chat. I'll come back to them. Let's talk about the Arcanum because
Yes.
that's what I was going to say. One of my. I've had all these fantastic guests: Baronex Perello, Martin Bailey, yourself obviously, and Frederick, and all the other names which I can't possibly remember all at the moment. But one of the most enjoyable talks that I did was when I got my guys from my Arcanum, my cohort. I had 4 guests on, and we just had a great chat about the Arcanum and street photography, and it was such an enjoyment. And I was thinking, I'm talking to a guy from Ireland, a lady from Glasgow, there was Susan from Tennessee, and another guy, and I'm thinking, I cannot believe I'm talking to all these guys around the world. Here I am sitting in my own little house in Bromley, Kent, in the UK, and I'm
Isn't that
talking to all these
something?
people. It's just amazing, totally amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk the Arcanum, this fantastic journey that we're on. You're the master. I'm an apprentice. I'm going to start it off actually. When I saw this posted by the guys from Trey, I thought if this comes off, this is going to blow everything that we've possibly thought about in learning and teaching and learning photography, especially from my aspect, teaching from your aspect. It's going to blow it away. I just hope that it gets off the ground. And we waited and we waited and we waited, and we were getting all these little snippets, and we know that you guys were going down to New Zealand and having a chat. The organisation of it, Karen, must have been mind-blowing. So tell us, how was it
Well,
your side of the fence?
so, each one of us has our own experience. So I'm not, I wasn't sitting in the middle of the heart of the whole thing. But Trey did tell me about his idea about 4 years ago, and I was like, oh man, count me in. This is just really exciting. Now I will say, it's first of all, I just have to, kudos to lynda.com, to Kelby Media, to these greats in the photography
Very
education
true.
field, because without them, first of all, they do an incredible job at what they do, and I admire, and I'm friends with the Kelbys and I adore them, and what they're doing is just so phenomenal. And it's as a result of these trailblazers that the Arcanum can even think about doing what it's doing. And so
Yeah.
this is a big playing field, learning and community and photography. There's a room for everyone, and that's something that I always want to say before I say anything, because I love the Arcanum and I love this whole idea, and it's different. It's just doing things differently. And so one of the big things that it does is the community aspect, and that was the thing that Trey, from the get-go, just loved about the idea. Was this, plus, he's an ex-gamer, he owned a company, and he grew up with video games, and so of course it's going to have a little bit of that feel, and he loves the fantastical and Harry Potter and all that kind of fun stuff, and that just makes it fun. But the bottom line is connecting people and having these lifelong relationships and learning, because you've been part of Google Plus for a long time. You know how much we've all learned in the last 3 or however many years just from being in this community, right? It's been phenomenal. It's been an explosion. It's been nuclear. Well, so if you purposely set up a school where you get to learn that way and kind of do it on purpose, and you bring in incredible masters, photography pros with all these different, skills and knowledges, holy cow, what a fun thing, awesome way to learn. So that was kind of the, the thing that got me excited about it. And of course, it took a while to even, from the time Trey announced it, because he he kind of lives in the future. He kind of goes in the future and goes, "Oh, that's the great idea," and brings it back, and then people are going, "But we have to create the thing." So the thing had to be created enough to be able to go public with it. So that was part of what took a while between the time he announced it and the time it actually started accepting apprentices, because there was quite a bit more to getting it to that stage than anybody even realized until they dug in. But yeah, it's really innovative. Even the platform is.
It's just when you actually start off and you get your invite and you get your name down, the excitement and the of being involved, and then of course there's the big rush of getting all your first 3-4 levels out there. Then of course, as Trey said, and I think every other master said, it all evens out, it slows down, and people start working at their pace.
Right.
I'm going to say this, I think those that have pulled out and moved on to other things because of business commitments, I don't think they really took that in consideration at the beginning. I think they saw the pace, especially in our cohort with Valerie Jardin, the pace that people were putting work out because of their enthusiasm, which is totally understandable. I think it frightened a number of people in terms of their commitment and how much they could carry on with that pace. They didn't stop and think, well, hold on a minute. It doesn't matter if I stay back at level 3, level 4 for 4 or 5 months, as long as I can bring in the work at a later stage when I've got the more important stuff to do. In other words, earning a pound and penny to put the bread on the table, so to speak.
Right.
But I think once we got through that aspect, and we've worked on, for me, and I've seen some of your critique sessions, which that's the value of what I don't think people realise outside. Obviously, being part of the Arcanum allows me to look at other critique sessions. Doug's sessions, Valerie's, obviously, Verena Patel's, yours, and others that I can't remember at the moment. But to listen to those other critiques about other people's work, which is not in the genre which I am working in, street photography, is so important. And so that's the learning curve that we're getting.
Yep.
That's the bit outside.
Good. I'm really glad that has struck home with you, because I was going to say that this is the other thing that Trey said, is that what we can offer are these critiques. People come in, so people may not know that as a master, you're given the opportunity to go in and choose your apprentices. And for me, I did it knowing what kind of group I wanted to work with. So I went through and read the description and got a sense of who this person was and what they were looking for, because I wanted people who understood the community aspect, that the biggest value is that there's not going to be necessarily, not with me anyway, because I'm a professional photographer, as is Verena, as is Valerie, and one-on-one time, lots and lots of one-on-one time is not really something that we're able to do because we've got careers and things like this. So my group is just unbelievable. I mean, they've bonded, we've become family, we're all over the world, and they have hangouts all the time, and they help each other choose what photos to present for their critique, because this is based on kind of an age-old master apprentice type of training where you present your work seeking that, as you work your way up the levels, that masterpiece, right? And so the critiques are phenomenal. You learn so much. And earlier, when we were talking, you said, oh, you're a landscape photographer, and I said, well, I'm a photographer. I find architecture informs my landscape. I find the feeling I get in landscape informs my street. So they all interact and interplay. So having the opportunity to see these critiques of other people's work in other genres only adds to your own. So it's super important.
I'll give you an example of how I found that my group of friends have helped me. And it's interesting that we were talking about it just before we started the show about street photography and how you're uncomfortable crossing, I call it crossing that line, asking that individual for the street portrait. And there was 4 of us having a chat on a hangout, and I'll tell you who it was, because it's Susan Gouge from Tennessee, and this lady comes over the screen, and she's so quiet. She doesn't say a lot, but when she does make a comment, it's very worthwhile. And we were talking about crossing the line. Valerie was in the hangout, and she just left. She had to go. She was going out to dinner with her husband. And I was talking about crossing the line. I said, how are you guys getting on crossing the line? I said, Susan, don't get involved in this conversation because I know you can do it. I've heard she's as quiet as a mouse, but she just starts conversations with everyone. And her husband says, oh, here she goes again. And she said, no, I will say something, Paul. She said, when are you going shooting again? I said, I'm going tomorrow. She said, I want you to go and get me 5 portraits. He said, and if you feel uncomfortable getting 5, get 3. And do you know, that was the one thing I needed. I needed someone to turn around to me and say, go get it.
Yep.
And I came back with 7.
See?
And exactly. And it was the first one. Yeah, sure, no problem at all. So I had 1 refusal from a couple. No. That was fine. Went on and I got another 2. And of course, I was cock-a-hoop, as we were saying. I got on, processed my images straight away, put them out on the in the cohort, and I just said, thank you, Susan. And it's broken the ice. It has broken the ice. But I need to be given that target. Now, no one had given me that target. It's just a fellow apprentice said, go and get 5. And if you feel uncomfortable, just get 3. But I came away with 7. And it was that to me means the world. It was so important for me in that crossing that line situation. Yeah, I can stand on the other side of the road and take a photograph. But
well, and that's the thing in the Arcanum. I mean, I haven't heard from any. Not that I'm in all the cohorts. I'm so busy. I don't have time to go. But we masters do talk behind the scenes and compare notes and things. And I haven't heard of any major competitive issues. You know, in many groups or clubs that you become a part of, there can be these kind of, you know, ego things and these little competitions.
Yeah, very much so.
Weird personality things that can happen. I mean, it can happen in the Arcanum too. I have none of that in my cohort. There is only support. Everybody just inherently understands that by supporting others and encouraging each other, that makes you so much better. And that's just one of the, and that is the spirit, that is the culture of the Arcanum that goes before anything, because there's just no room for self-importance or ego or crazy stuff like that. We're just.
No, I think in actual fact, if anyone does get that way in the cohort, I'm sure people just will not sort of converse with that person, and there is no room for it.
Yeah,
but
there
you're
really
right.
isn't.
It does happen. It does happen in camera clubs. It happens in camera clubs a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think in the Arcanum too, it's very personal, and you really do open up. And it's a very I'm coming back to the word personal experience.
Yeah.
And like I chose people that I could tell were already on that page and had a breadth and depth of life experience, artistic experience, as well as photography experience that I knew could encompass that, and that had that in the forefront, because I knew that the places I wanted to take them would require that we not waste our time and energy on personality issues, that we could all just kind of dive in and reveal under the kimono, as Trey would say, and get to work and just not have these other issues. Yeah. So it's a really unique experience even for me.
It is a totally unique experience, and I think that we haven't seen the best of it yet. It's continuously evolving.
It's still like,
Peter Giordano's coming up with loads of ideas, isn't he?
Yeah, and it takes time to implement new ideas, and it's so new that those of us who were the first ones in, you just got to get in and get dirty at a certain point. And people who complain, well, this isn't working or this and that, and it's like, well, it's brand new. We're terraforming.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's your side of the fence are learning as you go along, and I'm sure you're learning as well.
Oh yeah.
And obviously we're fortunate to be receiving the learning curve our side with regards to how to improve our photography, which is obviously the reason why we joined the Arcanum in the first place. It's power to the Arcanum, as one would say. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yep.
So I tell you what. How about, shall we do some one-word associations with some photographers? How about
All right.
Okay. So I put two names in my list to you, and I was surprised you hadn't heard of them. Joe Cornish and David Noten.
Okay.
Two UK landscape photographers, and you have, you know, this is one thing. This is what I find. There's you guys over the other side of the pond, where I think photography is such a main activity. Photography is big in the UK as well, but I think we're still stuck in the old traditional way. And for some reason, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong in saying this, but I don't think the UK professional photographer is reaching out to your side of the pond as much as it's apparent is happening with you guys coming over to here, because you go to a camera club and you mentioned Trey Ratcliffe, Thomas Hawke, and those sort of guys. Oh yeah, I've seen those, seen them on Google Plus. But if you turn around to them and say Joe Cornish, Dave Noten in the UK, people will know them, but they're not that well known over in your side.
Well, you know, I'm not sure whether this speaks to that or not. I'm just not sure. But what I have a feeling it might have to do with is, see, in my mind, because my roots in photography go so far back, that I think of it as we have our, like you say, the more traditional side, even back to the Ansel Adams and the Edward Weston and the, you know, the kind of the pioneers. So I call that the more traditional, classical, whatever, that side. Then we have our, I call it the new digital world, but it's like, you know, Google Plus. You know what an explosion that was on the photography scene, and now we've got, you know, the social media and photography is crazy, and the gear and the you know, the ways and means we have to create our art with the equipment and the technology that we have. I call it the new digital scene. I kind of lump it. I think of it as traditional, digital, but that's what I mean by each. So I find that the crossover points, it's not a complete melding, nor is it a complete separation, but the crossover points are not as numerous as each world is, if that makes any sense. So there are some incredible traditional, more classical types of photographers whose crossover into the social scene perhaps wasn't as strong or deep or at the time, you know what I mean, to kind of ride that wave. And I'm not saying they got left behind. It's just those of us who kind of came of age, and even though I have these deep roots, it's this strange trajectory, but I feel like I kind of came of age in this new digital scene. Yeah. Now I'm not as familiar with some of the ones who maybe aren't as active in that scene. Strangely, Art Wolfe, you know, who was also on your list, who is a photographer that I tremendously admire, he's been shooting for 40 some odd years, but he made somehow, I don't know if it's, you know, him himself or part of his team, but he is awesome in the new digital scene as well.
Yeah, so exactly.
Some of them do make the changeover. Now, I don't know if that really applies.
I've had this conversation with some colleagues in my business with regards to the social networking, and I do firmly believe, the UK is very much into Facebook and is very much into Twitter, but I do think there is still this a lot of people are still lagging behind in Google Plus. You go to any camera club and you say, "You on Google Plus?" No, what's that? You know, and Flickr. Oh yeah, I've got a Flickr account, but I'm a bit careful about what images I put on Flickr because I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that. So I think the social networking side of photography, especially in this country, is lagging behind. I hope it changes, because obviously we got some fantastic photographers. You know, and those two in particular, Charlie Waite is another one which comes to mind in terms of his landscape photography. They're not involved in the social side.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, I stumble on photographers all the time that are just blow my mind on a regular basis that I didn't know about, and I'm like, why don't I know this artist? And then then my brain just goes, there's so many of them, because there's some really serious, major, incredible talent out there.
Well, I'll give you an example. David Noten, I've had the pleasure of speaking to him once. He's hopefully he's going to be a guest of mine in the future. And David, I spoke to him at one of his exhibitions, and there was a huge print which he'd taken with one of the old pano cameras, not the Heidel, forgotten what they're called. That doesn't matter. And I said, "Tell me about this image, David." And this was a straight print, transparency print of an iceberg sorry, a glacier in Argentina. And I said, well, tell me about it. He said, right. He said, we trekked across the countryside. We got to this glacier. We pitched our tent, him and his wife, went up to the glacier, set the tripod up, set the camera up, and waited. And he said, no, 3 hours he waited. He said, no, the light's not right. Went back to the tent, they had a meal, spent the day, walked about a bit, back to the tent. Following morning, up at 3 o'clock in the morning. 4 days he did this.
Yeah.
4 days until the light was correct, and he took the image, this fantastic image of this glacier in Argentina. And I just said to him, I said, it took you 4 days to wait for the light. He said, exactly.
Right.
And that's his game. That's the way he goes about it. He's now since switched to digital, but that was one of those pano cameras. I've forgotten what they're called now. Someone no doubt email me what camera it was. Anyway, so check David Noten out when you get an opportunity.
I will. I absolutely will.
Yeah.
Every time every time you meet someone new, and you and I are meeting for the first time, everybody has their have you heard of, and so I'm excited to check out your artists that you love, because it's a big world out there, you know.
It is indeed. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. One word association. The first one, Ansel Adams.
The man, you know, the man, like he's the originator. Legend, epic.
Yeah. I can't think of any other words to add to that, really. It's until you actually sit down, read the books, look at the work, visit an exhibition, maybe if you're lucky enough to watch a YouTube or two of something of that nature, and see him and listen to him talking. He's out there, isn't he? He's one of the all-time greats. I'm just looking down the list here to pick another one for you. I'm really surprised you put this one in. I didn't even think of this lady, Miss Agnella.
Oh, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. Now, really, really interesting work of this by this girl, this lady. When you see it, it's storytelling in its ways. It's like fairy tales, isn't it?
Totally.
When you see this work.
Totally. And if you don't know Alexia Sinclair, you know, she has her own. It's the sort of a very similar genre. They're pretty much the same genre, but they each have their way of doing it, which I find so interesting. I love both of their work because I love seeing them, how they approach this same style of storytelling. Yeah. It's just so inspiring, and people are always surprised by the list of photographers that I admire and love, given that they think of me as landscape. But it's because my mind is in fantastical realms so much of the time. That I don't necessarily want to do what they do, but oh my God, I love looking at it.
You just appreciate the work. You appreciate the work. I know what you're saying.
I love going on the journey. They present such a journey. Ben von Wong is another one. So Benjamin von Wong.
Does Michael Kenner at all sort of Michael Kenner?
I don't know his work.
He's a minimalistic photographer. He's basically from Wigan, but he lives in Seattle. Concentrates a lot of his work in China and Korea, and but
I always feel so bad. I feel so bad when there's people like yourself that, you know, these are the people I admire and I love, and I'm like, gosh, I'm sorry, I don't know them. I have more to check
Michael Kenner out.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, so let's another one here, Art Wolfe, which we've mentioned already in our conversation. Art Wolfe, yes, he's another one, isn't he?
Breathtaking, breadth, depth, another legend.
And yet, it's interesting you mentioned he's one that has basically moved quite big from the old school darkroom development into digital, and is world renowned.
Absolutely. And you know, I did a chat with him in Seattle. Yeah. So he has this incredible garden, which we'll talk a little bit about, but I mean, you know, in that episode. But the other thing about art that I admire so much is, you know, his vision, his love, for what he does, his energy, his views about life and what keeps you going. And he's done this for so long. He's done it for over 40 years, and he is still as enthusiastic and excited about it as he ever was. And what I also love is the evolution, because now, you know, he's done wildlife, he's done landscape, he's done all these things, but now his new works, working with indigenous art body art and the tribes of the world, and he's creating these works with human form, is an evolution that just gives me chills. I just love artists who
I haven't seen that work. I haven't seen that work. I must catch up on that.
Yeah, he recently opened a gallery in New York. So, sorry.
All right. And this is the final one. I'm just going to throw this one in. Zach Arias.
I want to say, like, word revolutionary and rebel came to mind.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from there. Yet, I find his photography, especially his street photography now, is really, really... we've got a photographer over in this country. He's originally from Uruguay, spent a lot of time in Australia. His name's Alex Lambrecht. Bit of a mouthful. I'll email you that name later on. He's also one pushing the boundaries in street portraiture and what's the word? Lifestyle magazine type portrait work as well. And revolutionary is definitely one word that I would couple both Zach and Alex in. Very, very interesting work. And I just love the way Zach presents his shows. He tells you straight. If it's a rubbish photograph, you're going to hear it's rubbish, and that that's the politest form that Zach would say, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
really
it's a great show puts on that. Actually, I was just trying to think of another show. I saw Miss Aniela in another YouTube program where they actually went through a whole day process when she was doing her workshops with 5 different groups in 5 different rooms. It was amazing to see how she works with her crew. Yeah. So that's I think we just covered a nice selection of names that you sent me and names that I pitched in as well, and talking about those that we're not familiar with, which is always good to hear because we're always looking out for
good. I love expanding. I just love looking at all different kinds of art and photography. Yeah. It's just so fascinating to see how people see the world.
Yeah, exactly right. Karen, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed talking to you. We've just clipped over the hour, which is time has just flown for me. It's been absolutely great. We've done a one-word association, which is nice to finish up on.
Can I throw in a thought here to wrap up?
Yeah, sure.
A final wrap-up thought. Because earlier, when we started, one of your first questions was, "What does life is light mean to you?" Mm-hmm. And so, and we also talk about challenging one another to see things differently. So I have this vision. I told you about my vision, and part of my vision with my work is that when it's big, a big print or a collection of them on a wall in a space, that the work itself can heal people, transform people, bring more light into their world, make them feel better, inspire them, make them feel something wonderful so that possibilities open for them. That's the vision I have for my work, and I would challenge anyone who loves photography and is looking to take a step up, rather than think of gear or what somebody else is doing or even, whose work inspires you. Go back to who you are and think about why you're here and why you photograph and how you want to affect the world and how you want to affect the people who love your work. And see what you can do to bring that to your work more than anything else. That's what will give it a signature, that's what will give it purpose, and that's what will make a difference. Yeah,
lovely words, Karen, lovely words. Everyone who's watching this show, I do hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Superb comments and discussion and everything we talked about. It's just been great. Thank you so much, Karen.
You're so welcome.
It's the end of the show, and I'm going to have another little chat with Karen in a minute because I'm not going to let her go just yet. But it's the end of the show, and you know what I say at the end of the show, guys. Leave your camera bag at home. All the best to you. Bye for now.